There is a place high in the Himalayas where one river drops with such violence that engineers have called it one of the greatest untapped energy sites on Earth. A river that begins on the Tibetan plateau, cuts through mountains, falls through one of the deepest canyons in the world, then turns south, crosses into India, becomes part of the Brahmaputra system, and eventually flows toward Bangladesh and the Bay of Bengal. For millions of people downstream, this river is not an idea on a map. It is drinking water, it is farming, it is fishing, it is electricity, it is floods, it is survival. But now, China is building something near the upper reaches of that system that could change how Asia thinks about water forever. A mega dam so large that reports describe it as potentially the world's biggest hydropower project. A project measured not only in concrete, turbines, tunnels, and electricity, but in geopolitics, because when one country builds a dam upstream and other countries live downstream, the question is never only about power generation. The question is control. Who controls the flow? Who controls the timing? Who controls the data? Who controls the risk? And who gets nervous when the river becomes a machine? China says the project is about clean energy development and carbon goals, and on paper that is true. Hydropower is a major part of China's renewable energy strategy. The Yarlung Tsangpo project is planned with 5 cascade hydropower stations and has been described in reporting as a project expected to generate around 300 billion kilowatt-hours a year, far beyond the output of the Three Gorges Dam. But India and Bangladesh are looking at the same map and seeing something else. A dam in Tibet, on a river that becomes their lifeline. At a moment when water is becoming one of the most strategic resources on the planet, this is not just infrastructure, this is power. To understand why Asia is worried, you have to understand the geography. The river begins in Tibet as the Yarlung Tsangpo. It travels east across the Tibetan plateau, then enters a dramatic bend around Namcha Barwa, where the river plunges through steep mountains and deep valleys. This is where the hydropower potential becomes enormous, because water falling rapidly through elevation can generate extraordinary amounts of electricity. Then the river crosses into India, where it becomes known as the Siang in Arunachal Pradesh, before joining other river systems and becoming the Brahmaputra. From there, it flows through Assam, one of India's most flood-prone and agriculturally important regions. Then it moves into Bangladesh, where river systems shape the entire country's food, transport, sediment, and flood patterns. So when China builds upstream, India and Bangladesh watch carefully, because rivers do not respect borders. A dam built in one country can change risk in another. Even if the dam is designed primarily for electricity, not water diversion, it can still affect how water is stored, released, measured, and managed. And in a crisis, perception can be as powerful as reality. That is why this project matters. Not because China can simply turn off a river like a tap. That would be too simple. The real concern is more complicated. It is about leverage. It is about information. It is about timing. It is about whether downstream countries trust the upstream country, controlling major infrastructure above them. And in Asia, trust is not always easy to find. China and India are not ordinary neighbors. They are 2 nuclear-armed powers. They share a disputed border. They have fought a war. They have had repeated border crises. They compete for influence across South Asia, the Indian Ocean, and the developing world. Now add water to that rivalry. Not oil, not chips, not ships. Water, the one resource no country can replace. For decades, geopolitics has been shaped by oil routes, sea lanes, pipelines, and naval power. But in the next century, water may become just as important because populations are growing, climate patterns are shifting, glaciers are retreating, floods are becoming more destructive, droughts are becoming more politically dangerous, and the countries that sit upstream may hold new forms of power over those downstream. This is why China's mega dam creates such a powerful story. It sits at the intersection of 4 fears: energy, water, borders, and trust. The first fear is energy. China needs enormous amounts of electricity. Its factories, cities, data centers, electric vehicles, railways, and industrial zones all require power at a scale few countries can imagine. Hydropower offers Beijing something valuable. It is domestic. It is renewable. It can support grid stability. It can reduce dependence on imported fuel, and it can help China meet its long-term carbon goals. Seen from Beijing, the dam is a triumph of engineering, a way to turn extreme geography into extreme energy. A river dropping through the mountains becomes an engine, a remote region becomes a power base, a national weakness becomes an asset. That is the engineering story, and it is real. But the second fear is water. For India, the Brahmaputra is not just a river. It is one of the great arteries of the Northeast. It shapes agriculture, fisheries, transport, culture, and flood cycles. Assam depends on it. Arunachal Pradesh depends on it. Millions of people downstream live with its seasonal rhythm. Too much water can destroy villages. Too little water can damage crops, ecosystems, and livelihoods. This is why any upstream construction becomes politically sensitive. Indian officials and experts have repeatedly raised concerns about the project's potential effect on downstream flows, river ecology, sediment, and local livelihoods. Reporting has noted that India and Bangladesh have both expressed concern about possible downstream impacts, even as China says the project will not significantly harm downstream countries. This is where the third fear appears: borders. The dam is not being built in a politically quiet region. It is being built in Tibet, near a river system that flows into Arunachal Pradesh territory, administered by India, but claimed by China as part of what Beijing calls South Tibet. That gives the project a strategic dimension beyond hydropower. A dam in a disputed geopolitical landscape is never just a dam. It becomes a signal. It says, we can build here. We can control infrastructure here. We can shape the terrain here. We can turn geography into national power here. And for India, that signal matters, because China is not only building roads, railways, airports, military infrastructure, and villages near the border. It is also building water infrastructure upstream. That changes how New Delhi reads the map. The fourth fear is trust. Water politics depends heavily on data. When will water rise? When will it fall? How much will be released? How much sediment will move? What happens during earthquakes? What happens during extreme rainfall? What happens if a dam faces structural risk? What happens if relations between countries collapse during a crisis? Downstream countries want transparency. Upstream countries want sovereignty. That tension is at the heart of almost every transboundary river dispute. China has said it will consider downstream impacts and cooperate, while critics and downstream countries continue asking for more transparency and stronger assurances. The issue is not only whether the dam is safe on paper, it is whether the countries downstream believe they have enough information to trust what happens upstream. That is why the dam becomes bigger than engineering. It becomes diplomacy. It becomes a test of regional confidence. It becomes a question of whether Asia's future rivers will be governed by cooperation or suspicion. Now look at the scale. Reports have described the project as costing well over $100 billion, with some estimates around 1 trillion yuan or more. Reuters reported that China began construction on what it described as the world's largest hydropower dam in Tibet, with the project intended to support renewable energy and economic development, while raising concerns in India and Bangladesh. That number matters, because $100 billion is not normal. Infrastructure. That is not a local dam. That is a national project, a state project, a civilization-scale project. When China spends that kind of money in a remote mountain region, it is not thinking only about electricity. It is thinking in decades. It is thinking about energy independence. It is thinking about industrial growth. It is thinking about national integration. It is thinking about border control. It is thinking about strategic advantage. This is China's pattern. A railway is never just a railway. A port is never just a port. A dam is never just a dam. Each project solves one immediate problem, but it also creates a new form of power. A railway moves goods, but it also shifts trade routes. Port handles cargo, but it also creates leverage over shipping. A dam generates electricity, but it also gives the upstream country influence over water, data, floods, droughts, and downstream anxiety. That is why Asia is watching, because the dam does not need to be used as a weapon to become strategic. It only needs to exist. If India believes China can influence flows during a crisis, that belief changes planning. If Bangladesh worries about sediment and flooding, that worry changes diplomacy. If smaller countries see China mastering the rivers of the Himalayas, they understand what kind of engineering state they are dealing with. If Beijing can generate enormous power from high-altitude rivers, it strengthens the economic and political integration of Tibet into China's national grid. This is infrastructure as message. And the message is simple. China can build where others hesitate. China can build at extreme altitude. China can build through mountains. China can turn rivers into power, plants. China can turn geography into leverage. But there is another side to this story. The project is not risk-free for China. Building in the Himalayas is dangerous. This is one of the most geologically active regions on Earth. Earthquakes, landslides, glacial activity, extreme weather, and fragile ecosystems all create major engineering challenges. A dam in this terrain is not like a dam in a flat valley. It is a battle against the mountain itself. The Yarlung Tsangpo Grand Canyon region is ecologically sensitive, and environmental groups have warned that large-scale construction could damage biodiversity, landscapes, and local communities. Reporting from international outlets has also noted concerns from Tibetan groups and environmental organizations about ecological risks and displacement. This gives the story a darker complexity. China may gain energy, but at what ecological cost? China may gain strategic leverage, but at what diplomatic cost? China may build the world's largest hydropower project, but what happens if something goes wrong in one of Asia's most fragile mountain systems? These are not small questions, because water infrastructure does not fail quietly. A road can crack, a bridge can close, a port can slow down. But a dam failure, a sudden release, a landslide into a reservoir, or a major disruption in a mountain river system can affect millions downstream. That does not mean disaster is inevitable, but it does mean the margin for error is serious. And when the project sits above countries with tense relations, every technical question becomes political. This is why the word worried matters. Asia is not worried only because China is building a big dam. Asia is worried because the dam sits above a future where water may become a strategic pressure point. Think about the difference between oil and water. If oil becomes expensive, countries can buy from somewhere else, switch suppliers, use reserves, or slowly change technology. But water is local. A river basin cannot be imported. A farmer cannot switch rivers. Floodplain cannot move. A country cannot replace a river system overnight. That is why upstream water control has such emotional power. It touches food, it touches survival, it touches sovereignty, and it touches fear. In the 20th century, countries feared oil embargoes. In the 21st, they may fear upstream control. In the old world, power came from controlling sea lanes and fuel routes. In the new world, power may also come from controlling rivers, reservoirs, glaciers, and water data. The West built weapons, China built routes, and now China is building water power. But the story must be told. Carefully, China does not own all the water. Downstream, the Brahmaputra system receives significant water from rainfall and tributaries. After entering India, especially during monsoon patterns, some Indian officials and experts have argued that the downstream impact may not be as simple as public fears suggest, and that scientific assessment is essential. Reports have also noted views that India should study both risks and possible effects, rather than assume the worst immediately. That reality check matters. Because if the video becomes pure fear, it loses credibility. The stronger argument is not that China can instantly control all of Asia's water. The stronger argument is that China is building an upstream project so large that downstream countries cannot ignore it. That is the real power. It forces every country below it to watch, to calculate, to ask questions, to demand data, to prepare for worst-case scenarios, to rethink water security. That is geopolitical. Influence, not always direct. Controlled influence. And influence is often enough. This is exactly how infrastructure becomes a reality where one of Asia's most powerful countries is building one of the world's largest hydropower systems upstream of two densely populated neighbors. A reality where energy, borders, ecology, climate, and security collide in one mountain river. A reality where the next great geopolitical pressure point may not be a strait, a port, or a railway. It may be a dam. For decades, the world looked at China's rise through factories, ships, cities, railways, and ports. But the next chapter may be written in water. Who controls it, who stores it, who releases it, who measures it, who depends on it, and who fears losing it. This is the hidden story behind China's $100 billion mega dam. It is not just a construction project in Tibet. It is a test of Asia's future. Can upstream and downstream powers cooperate before water becomes a weapon? Can engineering solve energy demand without creating new insecurity? Can China convince India and Bangladesh that the project will not harm them? Can India prepare without overreacting? Can Bangladesh protect one of the world's most vulnerable delta systems? And can Asia handle a century where climate stress and great power rivalry meet at the same river? No one knows the answer yet. But one thing is clear. The dam has already changed the conversation. Before it generates full power, it is already generating fear. Before the turbines reshape the grid, the project is reshaping strategy. Before the water passes through its system, the map around it has already changed. That is the power of a mega project. It does not begin when construction ends. It begins when countries realize what the project could mean. And that is why this dam matters. Because in the mountains of Tibet, China is not only chasing electricity, it is building a pressure point above Asia's future, a project that could power cities, challenge engineers, alarm neighbors, reshape river politics, and remind the world that the most important resource of the next century may not be oil, rare earths, or chips. It may be water, and if water becomes power, then the countries upstream will matter more than ever. China understands that. India understands that. Bangladesh understands that. And now, Asia is watching the river. If this video gave you a new way to look at China's mega projects, hit the like button and subscribe. In the next video, we will follow another project that looks like construction on the surface, but becomes strategy when you zoom out. And tell us in the comments, do you think China's mega dam is mainly a clean energy project? Or is Asia right to worry about the future of water power?